Góðan daginn. Hi, and welcome back to Icelandic for Foreigners. This episode, I will be giving a verb overview, and the purpose of this video is to introduce you to some of the concepts we need to learn when dealing with Icelandic verbs, and then my hope is to make individual videos for a lot of these topics. So let's jump right into it. As you've probably noticed, Icelandic verbs can be somewhat complicated, but not as complicated as in other languages. There are 4 conjugations you need to learn for any verb in Icelandic, and I call them conjugations instead of tenses because 2 of them are tenses and 2 of them are moods. I'm not really going to get into that in this video, it's not very important. But the 4 conjugations that you need to learn are the present tense, the past tense, the present subjunctive, and the past subjunctive. Let's take a look at an example. Fara, to go. This is all the forms for the present tense. I, you, he, she, it, we, you all, and they. We also have different forms for the past tense, and the present subjunctive and the past subjunctive. So this gives you an idea of the 4 forms that you need to learn for any verb. And unfortunately, not all verbs conjugate the same way. But there is good news. You don't have to memorize every single verb individually because there are a lot of patterns. Specifically, there are 3 types of verbs, and when you know what type of verb a verb is, it gives you an idea of what those conjugations will look like. So I'd like to tell you what those 3 types are now, and I'll do an individual video on each of them in the future. So the first is called adi verbs, dtv verbs, and strong verbs. And some people divide strong verbs into more subcategories. I don't personally find that very helpful, but I will be exploring some of those in a different video. So this raises the question, how do you know which type of verb is? And the answer is the dictionary will tell you. It will let you know which pattern the verb follows. Like I said, I'm going to make a video for each one of these types that will let you know how to find the different forms of any given verb. But I'm not going to go into those types more here because right now I just want to give you a general overview of verbs. So aside from conjugation, there are other things you need to know about verbs as well. For example, many verbs can take an object, and if you've seen my video on Icelandic cases, then I've talked a lot about it there. For example, the verb að borða, meaning to eat, also takes an object. There's the thing that you're eating, and when you learn that a verb takes an object, you also need to learn which case it takes. And I really recommend you check out my cases video if you're unclear on what that means. But here's an example. Ég borðaði samloku. Samloku is the accusative form. This means I ate a sandwich. And we know that borða takes an accusative object. Some verbs can take 2 objects, like senda, to send, can take an accusative and a dative object. For example, hún sendi mér bréf. She sent me a letter. So always remember that when you learn a new verb, if it can take an object, you need to learn what case that object is. Additionally, some verbs require a preposition to take on a certain meaning. For example, the verb að hringja means to ring, but the verb að hringja í, it's the same verb, but it has a preposition at the end, means to call somebody. So sometimes when you learn a new verb, there's also a preposition to go along with it, and it can change the meaning, like in this one. Koma, which means to come, and koma fyrir, which means to happen to. Now, another thing that you need to learn about verbs is there's an imperative form. This is the command form. It's pretty straightforward. I'll cover it in a different video. Here's an example. Farðu að sofa means go to sleep, or látið mig í friði means leave me alone. So you also need to learn the imperative form for any verb. Another thing that you need to learn is the past participle and the passive voice, which is related, at least related in their different forms. So for the past participle, here's an example. Ég hef ekki séð hann í langan tíma, which means I haven't seen him in a long time. I'm going to have my own video just on this topic, but there's also that other form that you need to watch out for. It's not one of the conjugations per se, but it's a form of the verb. And it's related to the passive voice form, for example, in the sentence, Diskurinn var lagður á borðið, which means the plate was laid on the table. Finally, Icelandic has a very unique thing with verbs called the middle voice. This is generally created by adding st to the already conjugated verb. There are several different kinds of meanings it can convey. For example, it can convey a passive voice, like in this sentence. Fimm drápust í bálinu means 5 were killed in the fire. This is the middle voice of the verb to kill, and it has that meaning, were killed. It can also have a sort of reciprocal meaning, like in the sentence, Þau voru að skrifast á, which means they were writing each other. This is the middle voice of to write. It can also have just a completely separate meaning from the verb in the active voice, like in the sentence, Hann fórst í óveðrinu, which means he perished in the storm. This is the middle voice of to go, but when you use the middle voice of to go, it means to perish or to die. So that's all I'm going to cover in this video. Like I said, I wanted this video to just be an overview to give you an idea of what you need to learn about Icelandic verbs, and stay posted for videos on each of these topics in the future. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave any comments or questions you have below. I appreciate you watching. Bless, bless.